Firstly, thanks Mohanjit, Kartik for doing this with Yourstory. I've been a fan of Iron Pillar ever since we met last year. You brought Chris to India, and that was fantastic. And we did a live, which did very well after that. So thank you for your time. And Kartik, you're part of the network. I'd love to hear more about it. Mohanjit, why don't you introduce us and let's start?
So quickly, Iron Pillar is a leading mid-stage technology fund in India. And one of the things we are very, very proud of to have initiated this year is pulling together some remarkable people as part of the Iron Pillar network. And one of them is Kartik Hosanagar, who actually has been affiliated with Iron Pillar almost since the very beginning. He was formerly an advisor with Fund One and now part of the network.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And Kartik, what does the network do, and how did you get associated with Iron Pillar?
As Mohanjit mentioned, I've been involved with Iron Pillar since the very inception. So I'm a professor at Wharton, studying tech and digital business. I've been a founder, entrepreneur before. I was founder of a company called Yodel. So when the Iron Pillar team got started, one of the partners, who's a friend of my brother's, reached out, and then we connected.
Okay, has that network started? How old is this network, Mohanjit? And what have you guys done? Because everybody's starting a network. The SaaS Boomi guys have something. And what is the reason for Iron Pillar to do it?
So the short answer is Iron Pillar Network formally was launched just a couple of months ago. We came out and announced it formally in the media. It's something that I have been working on for, actually Anand and I have been working on for the past several months. And look, I think, virtually every venture fund should and does have some sort of a network of advisors and mentors or people that they can reach out to. But our take was we need to sort of formalize it and get commitments from these remarkable people to say, you know what, we will spend X number of hours on a quarterly or annual basis, and then have actually a formal agreement with them to actually follow through on that. And the idea is to create a curated one-on-one or one-on-few type of interaction between the network members and the portfolio companies. Not only the portfolio companies, sometimes it could also be prospective portfolio companies, right? So companies where we want to show that we can bring a lot more than just capital. So in terms of how has it worked, there are really two key aspects to it. One is the network members helping the portfolio companies. And by the way, the other is, and this was a great selling point, which I didn't think about up front, is for the network members to actually collaborate with each other. Which is really interesting because they all are very seasoned professionals, but they come from very different backgrounds. And so already there have been some interesting connections that have been made among the this cohort, and we're letting these flowers bloom, if you will. And the fundamental philosophy that Iron Pillar has is we put good people together and let good things happen.
Okay, and most of these Fund 2 companies are built from India for the world, obviously. Most of them are SaaS companies.
I think we're going to lean in that direction. We're not exclusively SaaS, perhaps, but it's going to lean more enterprise than domestic.
What are the type of companies that will come through this network, and can you name a few?
Yeah. So, even Unifor, while they've done really well, if you were to ask Umesh or Jafar, who runs their strategy, etc., he says, we need help along the way. Right. So I don't think any entrepreneur will say, no, we're done. We know exactly what we're doing and we don't need help. I think there are different types of help that are needed along the journey. Right. And the cohort that we've created in terms of roughly this 25-member Iron Pillar network provides different types of help from whether you're going from 0 to 1 or 1 to 10 or 10 to 100.
Okay. And do you want to talk about the network of 25 professionals and who's on board? Kartik, you want to tell us about it? Do you know the kind of people that you brought in, and what are they going to do for these companies and startups?
The way I look at it, and Mohanjit just mentioned that, this the network that Iron Pillar is setting up is essentially a network which has, a really diverse set of folks who are there for the entrepreneurs, but also in interesting ways, there for each other.
That's the power of a network, right? And if this can be done from India also, if Indian companies access this form of a global network, I think understanding scale would be easier, and understanding the tech and how you scale tech can become easier. How would you advise a founder? I mean, a couple of things that you've been a serial entrepreneur, you're a professor, but when you're a young entrepreneur and you think you made it, you've got a blueprint to succeed. You have an ego now, saying, "Hey, I can do it on my own." Are entrepreneurs ready to be mentored, or does that become a barrier of sorts sometimes in these growth stage companies?
Well, I'll say two things on that. The first is almost any good investor that I've ever worked with tends to screen for entrepreneurs who are fundamentally coachable.
Amazing.
And so it tends to be a trait of the entrepreneurs who make it and are able to work with the best investors, that they're naturally curious and have a learning mindset. So that's one way to look at it. The other way simultaneously is that the people who succeed also know ultimately it's because of decisions they make and it's because of things they do. And so there's also a certain level of self-confidence among these entrepreneurs. And so you really tend to find somebody who's at that intersection of the two.
Some of the founders can amazingly think big picture. They get stuck in weeds, right? They're not able to pull out of it. They want to scream out, but they don't know when and where.
As an entrepreneur, you're juggling so many things. It's not like you're doing one thing, you're doing 100 things. You're jumping and there's 500 things to do. Each week you're saying, which 100 can I tackle this week? And which ones can I just leave for later? So when you're juggling that much and you're so emotionally invested in what you're doing, I think the combination of it just makes it hard to sometimes step back. I mean, that emotional investment is a particularly important issue. I mean, it's pretty well known. And here I'm putting on my Wharton researcher hat, which is that, it's standard psychology that when you are so emotionally invested, then you start to lose some clarity. So I think it's a combination of these two. So sometimes it's the ability to just point them in the right direction. And there are instances where I'll sometimes tell entrepreneurs that looks like you've made up your mind. I think it's the wrong decision, but I have a feeling you have to go through this yourself to arrive at the same conclusion. And so sometimes it's, you might coach and they're going to ignore that, but that's okay because certain things have to be learned on their own. And certain times you're wrong as a coach. So it's this combination, but I think at the end of the day, it's where can you be brutally honest and mostly where can you be a sounding board? I mean, all of us, and you don't have to be an entrepreneur to understand this point, which is that sometimes all you need is not advice for somebody, but someone you can just sound this off or just and it all starts to make sense in your head. And that's all you need sometimes.
You both are entrepreneurs, right? Mohanjit more so from the funding side. You've done a business. Did you guys have mentors? Did you guys have that access in the 90s when you went to the US or the 80s or the 90s?
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. It's changed dramatically. I certainly did. So I moved to the US in 99. In 2000, when I was a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon, I started a company. Now, CMU is a pretty techie place.
Correct.
Even then, at that time, it wasn't techies who were starting companies. There were techies who were highly valued and hired into companies later. So there wasn't, at that time in 2000, a huge entrepreneurial culture at CMU. So, 2000, I did a startup. It failed. And really didn't have a network to go to and didn't even realize I needed to go and reach out to people. It's not like today's world where there's blogs and entrepreneurs constantly talking. You can follow them on Twitter and various blogs and know a lot of information and you also know how to reach out to them. This is back in 2000. So you didn't even know where to go. And I was sitting in Pittsburgh. I don't think there was even a VC there. Or, that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, we just didn't know. I remember I spoke to one investor back in 2000 who talked about investing in our company and, and I just didn't realize the value of the investor. And I was just, we didn't even take it seriously. Anyway, that failed. In 2004, I started a second company, which was a wireless broadband company.
Out of Pittsburgh or you'd moved by then?
Sorry?
out of Pittsburgh, or had you moved by
I
then?
had moved to Wharton, so I was in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, again, East Coast, Pennsylvania, it was not very different. There were some investors, but again, these investors weren't investing in tech companies. So I would go to talk to these investors, and this kind of business was so different. And yet again, we failed, but that was the first time I actually connected with a mentor, an exec at Microsoft, who helped make a number of connections. And then that was when I first realized that, but I still didn't pursue it enough. And then in 2005, I started my third company, Yodel. That one worked out. And some of it was just having failed twice, which obvious mistakes not to make again. You still make new ones, but at least you don't make the same old. And so your chances improve. But honestly, it was trial and error that got me there, and it wasn't access to a network. Now I'm currently building a company, and I've done it before, and yet this time what I'm doing is really creating a strong advisory board and having a lot of different people to reach out to. And so you'd think that 20 years later, having done it a few times, having had a successful startup, you would lean on others less, but actually I'm leaning on them more because now I'm wiser about this stuff.
Which was the first company that's accessed your network?
Look, so before the network was the network, because this just recently announced. I mean, we've been helping companies since day one, right? So the fact that Kartik did mention Now Floats, I'd love for him to opine on Bluestone as well, where he was remarkably influential, right? So the idea was to start connecting, entrepreneurs, and even in definitely in Bluestone's case, Gaurav is a serial entrepreneur, so he's been there before. And doing it again, but he valued, the advice that Kartik and others.
They're part of the Tatas now, aren't they? They're part of the Tata group, I think. Is Bluestone sold now?
No, so that's their competitor was called Carrot Lane.
Carrot Lane
was acquired by Tanishq. But Bluestone is a standalone. Maybe if I can just invite Kartik, to spend a couple of minutes just giving.
Yeah, please. That'll be interesting. Please.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So when Iron Pillar was making the investment in Bluestone, I had an opportunity to join that conversation with the investment committee. And so a lot of that discussion was around how do you take something that's clearly found product market fit? They're a jewelry e-commerce company. How do you take something that's found product market fit and scale it to the next level? And one of the conversations was, do you need to go omni-channel? Do you need to set up stores? And, one experience that I had previously was interactions and connections with Warby Parker, which is
the glasses.
Eyeglasses. Right. And they were my former students. And as they were scaling, interestingly, they had to go omni-channel, and they had to figure out what is that right combination of, online plus offline, and how do you leverage each channel? So eventually, actually, maybe a couple years after the Iron Pillar investment in Bluestone, or maybe it was a year, I forget the exact timing, but the entrepreneur then started thinking very seriously about omnichannel. And so that was where, I had a bunch of conversations with Gaurav on the way regarding essentially how he wanted to use offline. And the challenge here is, again, jewelry, high ticket purchase, and people want to touch and feel. They had come up with a very nice program where they would ship it to home for people to, or in fact, send it with someone home, and people can touch and feel the jewelry before making the purchase. But how do you increase awareness of the brand? How do you figure out, what do we do in offline? What does offline even look like? Does it look like a store in a mall, or is it something else? So we had a number of conversations around that. And it's a good example where, the entrepreneur is a very seasoned, experienced exec, was at Amazon before, knows how to do e-commerce, and even comes from a family where they've experienced building businesses and so on. So this is a great example where this person doesn't need hand-holding. He or she is able to make the decisions, but really just needed a sounding board and needed a few other examples and case studies. How did Warby Parker do it? How did Bonobos do it? These were all companies that I worked with, and I was able to also connect him with some of the investors and operators involved with Warby Parker, and that's one example.
5 mistakes that entrepreneurs make and what they should avoid during the growth stage.
Well, I don't know if I'll give you 5, but I'll at least give you what's top of mind.
Yes,
and I
please.
don't know what that number ends up being.
Yes, please. Go on.
So you specifically said growth stage. So I think the biggest one in growth stage that I'll mention that entrepreneurs make is what has worked so far will continue working. And that's the biggest mistake that an entrepreneur makes at the growth stage, because you've already found product market fit, you found a way to reach your customers, you found a way to service them, and all that's fine, but usually it doesn't scale. Usually you now need to unlock a new way of doing sales or new way of servicing and so on. And that's the number one mistake. And that's why most entrepreneurs who get it to a certain point are not able to take it to that next level.
Nice.
A second one that I'll mention is a lot of entrepreneurs assume that, and it's a related point, which is the growth comes from doing more of the same. I did a certain amount of, some activity that got me to say, some revenue, $5 million or whatever. Let me do that 10 times more, hire more people and do that at 10 times the level of pace, and I'll get to 50x or 10x the revenue, $50 million. And the challenge is that, it doesn't work as simple as that. And startups need to really change their strategy. So all these are discontinuous changes. And the theme with, both of the things that I mentioned is discontinuity, and it's not easy for someone to figure out these things. That's the common theme, and I'll stop with that.
No, that's fascinating, and I've experienced this with so many entrepreneurs that I mean. Thank you for that, Mohanjit. Closing thoughts.
Look, I just keep going back to the fact that, I'm old. I'm now north of 50. So age in the venture business, by the way, is an asset, because you get to meet a lot more people as you grow older. So the network continues to grow. But I've seen India evolve, right, from 2007 when I moved there till now. And it's gone through multiple phases. And thankfully, every phase lifts India further, both in terms of absolute value of accomplishment and aspirational value of where India and Indian entrepreneurs can go. And so with that context, I love the fact that success begets success. That phrase I love is definitely playing out in India. So entrepreneurs used to think, hey, if I can get to a $10 million company, that's a massive success. This is 07, 08. Now, $1 billion plus, right? Every company wants to be a unicorn. And that mindset shift has been remarkable to see. And, part of it is thinking big because they've seen successes. The other is that there's democratization of all sorts of capital, right? Technology capital, human capital, financial capital. So you can build world-class companies out of India. The final piece is, again, taking examples like Unifor, and obviously there are now waves of these SaaS companies that are leveraging India because now you have the talent available. There was a dearth of talent back in sort of the mid-2000s, but as the startup system has evolved and as people have gotten experience working for large technology companies, let's say here in the US, and have moved back for a variety of reasons, part of which is they see the opportunity in India, building large companies out of India. And so seeing that and then having that sort of instantiate itself through companies like Unifor and others is just remarkable, right? So I think going forward, you'll be able to leverage India, have the product development there, have inside sales, customer success, all of that be based in India. The front end, yes, the touchy-feely stuff may still need to be here in the US, but you're going to see a tsunami of fantastic companies come out of India, especially in the SaaS space. And Iron Pillar as a firm, I mean, we're excited to be part of that and hopefully again catalyze that wave as well. And I think the future is incredibly bright. And with people like Kartik, we'll play our part in making that happen.
So thank you. This is going to be a great resource for the entrepreneurs that you invested in. And at some point, I hope this becomes a larger network and we'll see where it goes. Thank you.